Hello, my name is Pooja. Welcome to another episode of Around the World. Energy plays an important role in an individual's life. An individual needs energy to carry out various tasks in everyday life. The importance of energy increases even more in the context of the energy needs of a country. At present, energy production remains the pivot of global politics. It is witnessed that the superpowers of the world always keep on searching for new resources of energy. The Gulf countries remain at the center of Middle East geopolitics due to their oil reserves. The immense oil reserves have framed the identity of these countries in the world. These countries are so powerful in terms of energy that they are capable of making or breaking any equation in global politics. A glimpse of the power of the Gulf countries came to the fore recently. Actually, the Russia-Ukraine war has created worldwide energy crises. In view of this, a tussle between the US and the Gulf countries regarding energy production was witnessed recently. The US kept on urging the Gulf countries to increase production repeatedly, and these countries kept rejecting the US request. However, now these countries have gone a step ahead and done something that has given a major setback to the US. Actually, OPEC Plus countries have announced to reduce the oil production despite US opposition. According to media reports, these countries will cut crude oil production by 20 lakh barrels per day. The OPEC Plus group will cut oil production from November 2022. It has signaled a sudden change in global geopolitics. Since Saudi Arabia dominates the OPEC countries and Russia dominates OPEC Plus countries, it is believed that now Russia and Saudi Arabia are on the same page. On the other hand, the US has also accused the OPEC Plus group of advancing Russia's agenda. However, the US has almost made arrangements to compensate for the shortage of oil. It has decided to ease the economic sanctions imposed on the Latin American country Venezuela. According to media reports, the US will ease sanctions so that Venezuela can produce more crude oil and export it to other countries. The US is also likely to benefit from this move. In today's episode, we will understand how politics over oil will change global geopolitics. We will know about the reasons behind the soft stance of the US towards Venezuela. In addition, we will also talk about how the recent decision of OPEC Plus countries will affect India. We will try to find answers to all these questions in today's story. First of all, let us know about OPEC and OPEC Plus. OPEC and OPEC Plus are organizations of the world's oil exporting countries. OPEC stands for Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. OPEC is headquartered in Vienna, the capital of Austria. OPEC was established in 1960 in Baghdad, the capital of Iraq. Its founding member countries were Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. UAE, Algeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Libya, Nigeria, and Congo are also members of the OPEC. There are a total of 13 member countries of OPEC. Apart from these 13 countries, 10 additional countries, namely Russia, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Brunei, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Mexico, Oman, South Sudan, and Sudan export oil. These 10 countries, together with the 13 countries of OPEC, form the OPEC Plus group. OPEC Plus was established in 2016. OPEC and OPEC Plus control oil prices around the world. These countries control large energy bases in the world. Hence, they can increase or decrease oil prices in the world as per their desires. As we have already mentioned that the OPEC group is dominated by Saudi Arabia while the OPEC Plus is dominated by Russia, it implies that Russia and Saudi Arabia are the two major players in the OPEC Plus. Despite this, Russia and Saudi Arabia were not very close to each other. Until last year, Saudi Arabia was a staunch supporter of the US. In return, the US used to provide security to Saudi Arabia. But now the situation has changed. Saudi Arabia is not paying heed to any request of the US. The US has urged Saudi Arabia to increase oil production many times, but Saudi Arabia did not accept the US request. The US wants Saudi Arabia to increase its oil production because midterm elections are scheduled in the US in November 2022. Hence, President Biden doesn't want oil prices to rise due to low production, as the increased oil prices may create challenges for him in these elections. In short, the relations between the US and Saudi Arabia have changed now. The relationship between the US and Saudi Arabia began to deteriorate during Donald Trump's tenure. Relations between the two countries weakened further after Biden became the US president. Saudi Arabia has supported Russia on several occasions during the Russia-Ukraine war. Now both countries are also on the same page, as the same is reflected in the recent decision of OPEC Plus. It is believed that this decision of OPEC Plus will serve the interests of Russia, and it will aid Russia in advancing geopolitically. However, the US is also leaving no stone unturned to counter Russia. The US has now moved towards Venezuela, once known as the Oil King, due to the setback received from OPEC Plus. Now the US is planning to lift the sanctions imposed on Venezuela. Venezuela was a major oil producer country in the 90s, but the oil industry condition in the country worsened due to a lack of investment and economic sanctions. Venezuela has the largest crude oil reserves in the world. According to the US intelligence agency, CIA, Venezuela has 30,230 crore barrels of crude oil. It means that Venezuela is a bigger player than Saudi Arabia. But Venezuela is not able to sell crude oil in the international market due to the sanctions imposed by the US. Now the US is planning to lift sanctions from Venezuela due to its energy needs. If it happens, then US oil companies can start their operations in Venezuela to meet US energy needs. Due to the alternate arrangements being made by the US to meet its energy needs, it can be inferred that the recent OPEC Plus decision hints that US diplomacy with Saudi Arabia is failing. In addition, OPEC Plus has hit 3 targets with one arrow with this decision. Firstly, the US may be weakened in the Ukraine war. Saudi Arabia is already supporting Russia. Secondly, it will also affect the internal politics of the US. It can even impact the upcoming US elections. Thirdly, it will have a significant impact on the foreign economic policy of the US. However, more layers of oil politics will be unveiled in the near future, which will directly affect global geopolitics. In the end, let us know how the recent decision of OPEC Plus countries will affect India. Significantly, India imports about 85% of its oil needs. Interestingly, most of the countries from which India imports oil are OPEC Plus countries. Therefore, India will be directly affected by the decision to reduce oil production. Oil prices will rise due to the low production of crude oil. An increase in the import bill will increase inflation as well as the current account deficit and fiscal deficit. In addition, the rupee's value against the dollar will decline further. In recent times, India has significantly increased its imports from Russia. Therefore, India will be directly affected by the recent decision of curbing oil production. After this decision, how much oil will India be able to import from the OPEC countries with which it already had signed deals remains a cardinal question. Furthermore, India tried to form a forum of oil importing countries a few years ago to deal with the aggressive policies of OPEC. It had planned to include countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea in this forum. The forum was being established to negotiate better terms with the oil exporting countries and reduce the clout of OPEC countries in the oil bloc. With this new decision of OPEC countries, it seems that such forums should now be established. China is second and India third in terms of oil consumption after the US. Hence, it will not be an easy task for oil exporters to negate this forum. If such a forum gets formed, then the whole world will witness its far-reaching consequences. Now we come to the next segment of the Sunday special episode of Around the World. In this segment, we will talk about other significant international news. Recently, a crucial bridge connecting the Crimean Peninsula with Russia was destroyed in an explosion during the Russia-Ukraine war. The Russian army blamed Ukraine for carrying out the attacks, and it launched missile attacks on the cities of Ukraine in retaliation. Given the seriousness of the recent Russian attacks, the leaders of the G7 countries held a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. In the meeting, the US promised to equip Ukraine with advanced air defense systems. Israel's Prime Minister Yair Lapid last week confirmed that a historic agreement has been signed on the shared maritime boundary dispute with neighboring Lebanon after months of US-mediated talks. After the agreement, Lebanon is expected to benefit financially and Israel is expected to strengthen its economy and security. Ever since Israel was formed in 1948, Lebanon and Israel have been at war over the disputed area. Both the countries have been claiming Karish, a small gas field spread over an area of about 330 square miles in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Prime Minister Albert Bahimi Barake has resigned from his post after the Central African country Chad's junta postponed the elections until 2024. Barake, a civil politician, was named Prime Minister of a transitional junta last year after President Mohamed Idris Deby seized power following the death of his father. This transitional junta was originally supposed to rule for 18 months. Deby took oath as Chad's president last week, and at that time he announced his decision to postpone democratic elections until October 2024. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is considering imparting military training to Ukraine's army embroiled in a war with Russia. The Australian Prime Minister shared this information with the Australian media last week. He considered providing military training after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky requested assistance from Australia. Notably, Australia is one of the largest non-NATO contributors providing aid to Ukraine. That's all in this episode. Let us note down the question based on today's story. Mentioning the major players of oil politics, discuss the change in the global energy pattern. Thank you.